Hey guys, how's it going? Welcome back to another episode of The Witcher 3. So in the last episode, we finally finished up with the main story of this game. It was a pretty interesting ride, very fun. We're going to move on in this episode, but we're not going to quite start with the Blood and Wine DLC yet. I mean, we've already started with it, but we're not going to continue with it in this episode. Instead, there are a couple more places of interest here in Skellige that we can collect. I feel like we're going to just use this episode, collect the rest of these. I mean, you don't have to feel obligated to watch these videos at all. Usually I don't talk anything, I don't talk about anything too on topic. It's just random discussions. For this particular episode, though, it's going to be slightly on topic. We're going to talk a little bit about the Witcher universe, and yeah, there's quite a lot of them here, but I'll try to go through all of them. I mean, we may or may not have enough time, but it'll probably just be a longer episode if I can't get it done within an hour or something. Before we do that, though, we all know how annoying those sirens are when I'm sailing across the ocean, so we're going to turn the game's difficulty down to very easy. There we go, just so that we can take a little bit more damage while sailing the boat and not have to die. And we're also going to go into our inventory and just get that inventory carry weight all the way to its maximum, just so that we don't have to constantly go back to a merchant or something to sell off our stuff. I'm already here in Skellige, so we can just get this started. Alright, so let's just jump. I've already just marked this boat here. This is the one we're going to use. And one more thing I should note is that just like all of my other episodes or really just the last one where I was doing this, sailing across the oceans, the boat controls are still very finicky and strange. It's not very responsive. So when you see... God, I already crashed. If you see me not accelerating properly or not stopping properly or not turning properly, that's just the boat controls being weird. It's not the problem with The Witcher 3 on my computer or anything. It's mainly just because of this one patch that happened for the Enhanced Edition. And it just makes things so strange. Like, for example, right now, I'm trying to stop, but it just keeps on going. And I don't know. I don't know what it is. I've already noted this. I've already complained about it many times in the past. I don't think I can fix it by myself. So that's just going to be how it's going to be. Okay, so we got our first smuggler's cache here. There we go. Gonna collect this thing. I mean, you could make an argument saying that I should just do these off screen, but I named these episodes properly. I call them Sailing the Seas. If you don't want to watch this, just go ahead and skip on to the next one. If you do want to hear about some stuff that I'm going to talk about, then yeah, stick around and see where this goes. Anyway, so let's pick these things up. Whatever it is, I'm just gonna pick it up, and if it turns out to be useless, I'll just either sell it or discard it. Yeah, because for now we do have essentially infinite carry capacity, so we can pick up whatever we need to. Very good source of money, so I can't really, not do this. Because once we get into the Blood and Wine stuff, get into Toussaint, and we need to craft new equipment, yeah, it's gonna cost a whole bunch of money. And this is basically just trying to prepare for a little bit. I don't think any amount of preparation would be enough to actually get us what we need to get right off the bat. Once we get into Toussaint and we unlock those Grandmaster Witcher equipment, those are going to cost so much money. I can already see it. Even though I don't know how much they're going to cost yet, I have a feeling that whatever we have right now, 3,600 crowns, is not going to be enough. So we got to do this. Alright, anyways, as for what I'm going to talk about, because these episodes are usually pretty tedious and boring, nobody wants to just listen to me talk about how I'm getting killed by these sirens, or how I'm picking up these random stuff from these smugglers' caches. I'm going to talk a little bit about the Witcher lore in this episode. In particular, I actually think that the story of The Witcher, I'm not going to talk about the other Witcher games. I'm mainly going to be focusing on the books in the Witcher series, and not just any of the books, because there are 3 kind of Witcher books that focus more on kind of before even the main story saga for the Witcher books. So yeah, I'm talking about the 3 called The Last Wish, The Sword of Destiny, and Season of Storms. I'm not going to talk about those very much because those are either mainly just like short stories or just side stories that don't really pertain to the main story of The Witcher 3. I have noted, okay, so see what's happening right here. I have noted that this is possible, and these sirens can just drag these smugglers' caches for so long, and it's super annoying. Let's see if I can like kill it. Yeah, there we go. Anyway, so I'm going to talk about mainly the events, or some events, that happen in the main Witcher saga. That is the 5 books called Blood of the Elves, Time of Contempt, Baptism of Fire. Man, what are they called? What's the 4th one called? Tower of Swallows. There you go. And Lady of the Lake. So, I mean, do keep in mind though that it has been like 2 years, more than 2 years since I read these books. So, I mean, okay, the Lady of the Lake just came out 2 years ago, so I read that a while ago as well, but I may not remember all of the details in all of these books, but I can give you kind of like a summary on what happened, and I'm mainly going to cover kind of Ciri's involvement in these stories. I'm not going to like go over everything that happens with everyone. You know, there's a bunch of events that happened with Geralt, a bunch of stuff that happened with like the mages, one mage in particular called Vigor. There's a bunch of things that happened with like elves and just other side stories that happen within these books. In fact, I'm pretty sure Geralt's involvement in these 5 books is kind of less than some of the other characters, because his story is actually, it's not so different from Geralt's involvement in The Witcher 3. You know, at first we're looking for Yennefer, and then we're looking for and then we look for Ciri. Yeah, basically that's Geralt's involvement in the entire Witcher saga, written by Sapkowski. I can never get the pronunciation of that guy's name right. But Ciri's involvement, though, is quite significant, and she goes through a lot in these stories. So we can just, you know, I'll give a quick or a relatively lengthy synopsis, yeah, on what happened. I may not have all the details, but I'll have the general gist of what Ciri went through in these stories. Now, this time span for these books, starting from the very beginning to the very end, is about a year and a half in Witcher time, and it would be around the year like 1268, so it'll go through 1269. The current year in The Witcher 3 is 1272, so this would have been 3 or 4 years in the future from the books themselves. Now, one thing that you do have to understand is that CD Projekt Red's games run off of like a completely different canon from the books. In the books, certain events happen, and the games kind of have to like retcon these events to fit CD Projekt Red's narrative a bit better. For example, one semi-spoiler I can tell you about the books is that at the very end, Geralt actually dies. His death is really up to interpretation, but it is quite clear that he pretty much dies because, you know, Triss and Zoltan, they actually give their condolences, and Ciri is like super sad, just taking them away to where they're supposed to be buried or whatnot, and everyone is saying this is the end, but something else is going to begin. Yeah, so basically I think Yennefer was with him too, and so basically he just dies right at the end of the Witcher books because it was supposed to be the end. Nothing else is going to happen after that. But we all know that our friend here definitely didn't die. He survived to see 3 Witcher games after that. And you may or may not remember, throughout several conversations we've had with Geralt and other NPCs in this game in particular, is that Geralt actually really hates pitchforks. And I'm totally gonna die. Hold on. Yeah, let's see if I can kill off these sirens. Okay, you know what? Let's drink a potion here. So, in in the games, they will just say, you know, Geralt was gravely injured by a pitchfork in the town of Rivia, which is kind of what happened, except in the books in Rivia, he actually, it strongly suggests that he died to the pitchfork. It was just like a random peasant too. There was like some kind of civilian uprising. I think they were just trying to kill off all of the non-humans in Rivia. It's just like some really stupid argument that escalated. And then Geralt just got caught within that whole argument. People thought he was an elf, which was ridiculous because Geralt looked nothing like an elf. And then someone stuck a pitchfork inside of him. Yes. But anyways. So that is quite different. Going on from the games, it was just like Geralt was gravely injured. He didn't actually die there. But let's just start from the very beginning. And that would be Ciri's story. Now, we can basically start from when Ciri's mother was actually pregnant with Ciri. So this would have been in one of the short stories, but I think the story is relevant and significant. And that is how Geralt actually came about being the father of destiny to Ciri, and why they're kind of like, and why they have such a like feelings for each other, right? A really deep bond with each other. And there is this old tradition called the Law of Surprise, which people in the Witcher universe actually, they treat this very, very seriously. And actually, there's going to be a chest here, and or chest key here at least, and we can leave this chest. So the Law of Surprise states that if I do something for you, I can demand something from you in return, but I can demand something that you don't know that you even have. And that's the basis of this law. And Witchers live by this law quite frequently. In Geralt's case, Geralt actually attended this party. I believe it was Ciri's mother's... they were trying to find a suitor for Pavetta, so that's Ciri's mom. And he was at this party, and then this one guy called Dooney showed up, and he was saying all like, oh, Pavetta is supposed to be mine, but he's like this really ugly person. It turns out that Dooney is Emir Var Emreys, and he was just driven away from his homeland, and his title, or he was supposed to be the next emperor, but he was overthrown by usurpers and all whatnot. But people at the party, they weren't happy that this Dooney guy was going to be Pavetta's suitor, but he kind of just like insisted. But people got really mad, and Geralt had to actually save this guy from a pretty lethal attack. And that is why after Geralt saved him, he's like, well, you now have to do something for me in return. And I'm going to invoke the Law of Surprises here. You're going to give me something that you have, but you don't yet know. It turns out at that time, Pavetta was actually pregnant with Dooney's child. And without even knowing it, Geralt basically went into this contract that people take very seriously, Law of the Surprises. And he was supposed to just father this child at this point. Really, really hate these sirens so much, you have no idea. And the child turned out to be Ciri. Actually, Geralt did not meet Ciri for another maybe 5 or 6 years, or maybe even longer than that. My memory is a little fuzzy on that. I mean, I believe in the Witcher Netflix series, it was 9 years. It could have been either that or 6 years. But yeah, somewhere within 6 to 9 years. Is when they first met, and where Geralt actually took this Child of Destiny thing seriously. And these bolt controls, I'm telling you, they're so bad. I'm trying so hard to move and turn right now, and it's just not working. Alright. Is there anything else I need to grab around here? If not, then I'm just going to get out. Yeah, I'm out of here. There's no need for this grief. Let's move on to this one over here. We're just going to fast travel to this harbor on Unvik. So anyways, Ciri becomes a Child of Destiny to Geralt. And we're going to fast forward around 5 or 6 years to the massacre of Sintra. So that would have been in 1272, which is 10 years prior to The Witcher 3, where Nilfgaard attacked Sintra, and Queen Calanthe, who was the queen of Sintra at that time, she actually committed suicide because she thought it was completely hopeless. But before that, she told Ciri that you have to find, Geralt of Rivia because you're supposed to be bound by destiny. And oh my god, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. I cannot move this boat at all. This is the most ridiculous thing. Like, it is so absolutely ludicrous how bad these controls are. Let me just get off and try and go on again. I don't want to break momentum in my story, but I mean, I'm not like the best storyteller in the world or anything, but like when things like this is just frustrating me in the game. I'm so sorry, guys. Alright, well, we have plenty of time. Let's just swim over there. This is just so stupid and ridiculous. In fact, I'm gonna swim over there to grab that boat, because I think, yeah, we need, no, we're gonna go over here. Grab this boat by Torgavolka. There we go. Revisiting the Tower of Swallows. Sorry, the Tower of the Falcon. Yes. So, where was I? Yes. Queen Calanthe, before she committed suicide, she told Ciri to go find Geralt of Rivia because they were supposed to be bound by destiny. You cannot escape the law of surprises, essentially. And at this point, Ciri, caught in the Nilfgaardian attack on Sintra, she met up with this one Nilfgaardian knight who was like wearing this epic helmet with bird's wings. They describe it in the books. And the whole town was burning from the war, and this one Nilfgaardian was just like chasing Ciri down. And this is literally going to give her nightmares in the future because she just got really traumatized by this event. This Nilfgaardian knight turns out to is called Cahir. He was on like a special retrieval mission that was given by the Emperor of Nilfgaard himself, and the Emperor wanted Ciri at this point for unknown reasons, but I will go over that a little later. And this guy Cahir was tasked to go to Sintra and try to retrieve her in amidst the war and everything. So this guy, being very loyal to Nilfgaard, obviously he carried out his mission. He found Ciri and he was just like chasing after her, right, while she was running away. Eventually he actually found her. And it's a little ironic because without Cahir there, Ciri would have died in like the fire during the war. She was just, I believe she was like unconscious, all passed out in the fire. And without someone to rescue her, she would have just died. And Cahir, his mission was to bring Ciri back alive. So at that moment, he saves her. He rides away. And it's really funny because after that, he was just like really tired, right? Cahir was trying to essentially escape from Sintra because even though Nilfgaard was winning the war, there were still a bunch of Sintrian soldiers out there, trying to look for the Nilfgaardian, trying to kill them. So this guy who has Ciri, the Sintrian prince, he obviously had to be very subtle. He has to be very inconspicuous as to what he's doing. So he takes off all his Nilfgaardian armor. Why can I not go over here? Oh, is that just not a fast travel point anymore? Okay, fine. Yeah, I do remember that after you finish the game, you can no longer go there, but we can still just like walk over there. So he was like really tired, and eventually he just falls asleep. He saw that Ciri was also asleep, so he's like, well, I need to get some shut eye. So he falls asleep, and while he's sleeping, Ciri just escapes, which I think is kind of dumb, but hey, the Nilfgaardian knight, Ciri just gets away, and she was supposed to like kill him at that point too, but I think she was very scared, and all she really wanted to do was just to escape. So she got away, and I don't really remember what happened between then and the next event, but she eventually ended up in the forest of Broccolon, which is kind of like a forest where there are a bunch of dryads, and these dryads, they really hate humans, but for some reason they accepted Ciri, and the queen of the dryads, called Eithne, she was just taking care of her for a very long time. And then we move on to the next story where Geralt was supposed to bring this missive from, I believe it was Temeria, but it could have been like another one of the little countries near Temeria. And he was supposed to bring a mission, a message to Brokilon saying that the king wants peace. And while inside the forest of Brokilon, he meets this little girl. And now keep in mind that Geralt and Ciri have never met before, you know. She is supposed to be the child of destiny, but Geralt kind of just like forgot about her. It's been 6 years or 9 years. And at this point, he had no idea that this little girl was supposed to be Ciri. But eventually, they were like chatting and stuff. They were saying, and then Ciri just like accidentally mentioned Queen Calanthe's name. And I think it was by accident. Like she was telling a story and then she mentions Calanthe's name. And then Geralt's like, wait a minute, Calanthe, that's your grandmother, which means you are Pavetta's daughter and you are supposed to be my child of destiny. And then Ciri was, who was already informed about Geralt of Rivia by Calanthe herself, understands that this is Geralt and this is someone I am bound to destiny with. And then it turns out that the Dryads of Brokilon at this point, they've grown pretty attached to Ciri. They wanted to take care of her. Eithne in particular wanted Ciri to be part of her destiny instead. And at this point, after meeting Geralt, Eithne says, you know, we have to leave this choice up to Ciri. And Eithne dubbed Ciri with the name of the Sword of Destiny. And she kind of metaphorically says that the Sword of Destiny has two edges. Geralt of Rivia, you're one of them. I am the other one. We have to let Ciri herself decide what she wants to do. I will continue that story after I loot this corpse. Oh, just another key. And are we... Oh, Jesus. A bear. Okay, well, I can kill this guy. We're on easy right now, so it shouldn't be too bad.
What now?
I'm not going to pay too much attention to the actual fight. Just want to get it over with. Okay, great. So, of course, Ciri and Eithne have no real bond with each other. But Ciri and... what the heck? Just another bear spawn? So random. Whereas Ciri and Geralt actually have this bond through the Law of Surprises. So naturally, she decides to go with Geralt and not stay in the Forest of Brokilon. Eithne understands this, so she just kind of let them go. And when they were leaving, this Ermion, if you remember, the Hierophant from Skellige, actually just met them randomly outside the Forest of Brokilon, and this is when Ermion takes Ciri to the islands of Skellige to live out a couple of days or a couple of years, because Geralt at this point, he didn't want to stay with Ciri for some reason. Like he says, you know, I'm a witcher, I have to stay true to my path. For now I can't take care of you. Ciri was really upset about this. She thought she was going to be like sticking with him forever. But at that point, she just says, well, we are bound by destiny. We're going to see each other again anyway. So, yeah, we're just going to go to Skellige. And the reason they're going to Skellige, by the way, is because Calanthe's second husband is actually the brother to the king of Skellige. So the king of Skellige at that point was Bran Turesek. And he actually remained king until the very beginning of The Witcher 3. So if you remember, when we were doing the Skellige main quests, the very first thing that we did was go to this party, a wake, held in honor of the death of King Bran. And yeah, so Bran ruled for quite a long time. So at that point, his brother was called Iced, and Calanthe actually married Iced. Iced is obviously not Ciri's birth grandfather. That would have been a guy called Ragnar, who was Calanthe's first husband, but he, I believe, died in a war. So there's not much more to say about that. But Iced being Ciri's step-grandfather, there was like a little bit of a connection between Ciri and the people of Skellige. And Krakon Crate is actually Iced's cousin, I think? No, it would have been nephew. Yeah, I'm pretty sure it's the nephew. So, Krakon Crate actually does have a connection with Ciri as well. That would make Hjalmar's... Oh, okay, it would have been step-cousin, I guess. That would make Hjalmar... what would that relationship be? step cousin once removed, I think. Well, anyway, it's a very distant relationship. It's not even like a true relationship, right? It's just a relationship through marriage. But while Ciri was in Skellige, a couple of years passed, and there's this one event where Hjalmar was actually like ice skating, and he was saying something like, "No one can beat me in ice skating. I'm the best." And Ciri was just like playfully just showing off her skating skills, and it turns out that Ciri was able to beat Hjalmar in this skating contest. And then Hjalmar was just like really impressed about that, right? It's like, and then he jokingly said something about, "Why don't we get married?" or something like that. I believe Calanthe at that point was just like super upset about that. She says, or someone else, I don't remember. She says, you are not meant to marry Hjalmar. Even if this is a joke, I cannot let this stand. So she just like grabbed Ciri and ran away from Skellige at that point, and she just never returned. Yeah, it's kind of dumb, but that's just how it went. At that point, I'm pretty sure Croc's other child, Ceres, she wasn't even a thing in the books. So she was just like kind of made up for The Witcher 3 itself. But anyway, so at that point, she left Skellige and went back to would not have been Sintra. She actually ended up just like in this random little village. I don't even know where. It's just like random village in the Northern Realms. And then as Geralt was just like performing his Witcher duties, he's walking the path, he stumbles upon this village, right? She was like supposed to be this orphan along with these other kids, and one couple of peasants. And then just by sheer absolute coincidence, or maybe not, depending on if these people believe in destiny, Geralt stumbles upon this random small village, and he finds Ciri. And from then on, they kind of just like stuck together, because they were like, wow, if it's by this kind of coincidence that we meet again, then it must be destiny. We are destined to stay together, or something like that. So yeah, that's, I know I said I wasn't going to explain too much about the short stories, but those events all happen in the short stories. Starting from the actual saga itself, let me remember what happened. Yes. So Geralt eventually took Ciri to Kaer Morhen to train her to be a witcher, because that's apparently all Geralt knows to do. And that's where she meets like all of our witcher brothers, right? Lambert, Eskel, Vesemir. There's one other witcher called Cohen who died during the battle against Nilfgaard at Brenna. But at that point he was there, and every one of the witcher brothers actually taught Ciri like moves, how to become a proper swordsman and how to become an effective witcher, especially Vesemir, who really does like Ciri. We've seen that he was, in this game, he was willing to sacrifice himself so that Ciri can be safe, right? And then eventually Triss also showed up in Kaer Morhen, and she taught Ciri a little bit about like how to become a woman. She was supposed to teach her the magical arts, but I don't think she did a really good job. She was much more of a big sister to Ciri, and just cared after her, right? She wasn't very strict with the magical training. Maybe you read a couple of books here and there, but Triss never forced Ciri to learn anything. She was just, you do this if you want it, but really I'm just here to teach you how to be a girl, because you're surrounded by like all of these men, right? And eventually the Witchers were like, well, enough is enough. I don't think Ciri can stay here at Kaer Morhen forever. She's not a real Witcher. I don't think that's the real reason why she left, but there was definitely a reason that she needed to go. And they were like, well, she has to go somewhere. Why doesn't she become a priestess of Meletali? Because that's what girls do, right? And so they all agreed, and Triss at that point just took Ciri to Elander, where Mother Neneke works as this like head priestess of Meletali, and she studied under Neneke for a little while until then. Let me just try to recall what happened after that. Yes, until one day Yennefer shows up, and now she was like at this point, obviously Yennefer was already perfectly acquainted with Geralt, and she understands that Geralt and Ciri was like they shared like a special bond. But now that Yennefer shows up, she really wants to educate this girl in terms of just the magical abilities. And much stricter than Triss, she actually forced Ciri to like learn the books, learn the spells. She taught her about the nature of magic, how you can extract magical energy from various sources in nature, like the water, the wind, the trees. And they spent a long time just like traveling together. Where at one point there was this council of mages that was being held in this island called Thanedd. I believe it's very close to Velen. In fact, it was right next to a city called Gor's Velen, which was probably just slightly southwest of Velen itself. So yeah, Yennefer, she being a mage, a sorceress, wanted to attend this conclave or this just meeting. That's why she like brought Ciri there, and at that point Ciri met up with Geralt again because they could just like never stay away from each other. And during these events on Thanedd, with this kind of council of mages, this one mage called Vigor, he actually just like he created this revolt against all the other mages, and he's just like, well, I'm too good for all of you. He kills off a bunch of other mages. Like there's this thing called the chapter of mages, like these very strong, powerful sorcerers. He just like kills off a bunch of them, right? Among them are people like Tisaya de Vries, which I think you would know if you watched the Witcher Netflix series, but I don't know if that event definitely didn't happen in the Netflix series. That would be like way off into the future. So yeah, at this point, Vilgefortz is actually working for the Emperor of Nilfgaard, and we all know that the Emperor Emhyr, he really wanted to get his hands on Ciri. Again, I will explain the reasons a little bit later. Cahir didn't do his job properly. In fact, after Cahir got lost, after he lost Ciri in Sintra, like remember he fell asleep and Ciri just like escaped. After that event happened, people just like made a laughing stock out of him, and he was imprisoned in the Nilfgaardian dungeons for a whole year. But during these events at the Council of the Mages, the Emperor actually allowed Cahir to go back there to try to retrieve Ciri once again, because apparently he was like one of the only capable Nilfgaardians who was also able to speak the common tongue. So that would be English or whatever other language you read the books in. And just no one else, no other Nilfgaardians could speak the language. So it's like, well, this guy, he's a criminal, he is incompetent, but we'll send him back there to try to retrieve Ciri. And of course, naturally, Cahir failed again. They actually met face to face once again, Ciri and Cahir, and they were like in a sword duel. But Ciri, having received Witcher training from Kaer Morhen, she just like slashed Cahir's hand, gravely injured him, and then just escaped anyway. So that was pretty funny, because now Cahir has basically failed twice, and the Emperor is not going to forgive him for that. In fact, the dude was like put into a coffin and just left to die. Yeah, I think there were people like transporting him as well, but at that point he was just left to die. He didn't die, obviously, but we're not going to talk about Cahir's story or his involvement in everything. But just do know that after these two encounters with Cahir, Ciri was like deeply, deeply traumatized by this one Nilfgaardian knight who was going to capture her and all that. Eventually, Ciri, while she was running away, Vilgefortz, also working for the Emperor, he also wanted to get his hands on Ciri. Now, for an entirely different reason from why Cahir wants Ciri, but he wanted her nonetheless, and he was also chasing her throughout the island of Thanedd. And also, one thing that we should also know about Thanedd is that it's very close to a tower called the Tower of Swallows. And that would be a very similar tower to the Tower of the Falcons right here on Skellige. And legend says that there is a portal in the Tower of... Sorry, it would be the Tower of Gulls, not Swallows. The Tower of Gulls. There was a legend saying that there's a portal on the Tower of Gulls that's supposed to lead to the Tower of Swallows, wherever that is. No one knows where that is. It's like a myth at this point. But the portal has been inactive for who knows how many years, and it would have been impossible for anyone to step into this portal. In fact, magic is almost suppressed around it. You won't even be able to cast portals for yourself. But Ciri, through her own luck, magically found this portal while she was escaping from Vilgefortz and Cahir. And she just stepped into the portal and boom, she disappeared. And at this point, people were just really confused why she's able to step into the portal, and then eventually everyone deduced that it's the power of the Outer Blood that allows her to reactivate these dead portals. And I feel like that's kind of what happened at the end of The Witcher 3 as well. When Ciri and Avallac'h were in the Tower of the Falcon, Tor Gavalka, and Ciri was just able to step into this portal. I don't think anyone else has that actual ability. So she steps into the portal, and because the portal is it's been inactive for a very long time, it was very unstable. It was supposed to bring her to the portal where the Tower of Swallows is, but instead it didn't bring her to a different dimension. No, it's not the same as the portal in The Witcher 3. It actually brought her to this massive desert range. It was called the Karathi Desert, and she was just there, hungry, thirsty, tired, in the middle of the desert, no hope of escaping. She just had to fend for her own at that point. I think she wandered the desert for a week or maybe even 2 weeks. It's very unrealistic, because how do you expect, at this point I think she's maybe 14 years old, maybe a bit older, maybe a bit younger. How do you expect this little girl to survive in the middle of a desert, no food, no water, for 2 weeks? The way the books explain how she survived, though, is that she had this knife with her, right? She was not completely without equipment, but she had this little knife with her. And what she would do is that every night she would lay out this knife on this rock, and in the morning, because the temperatures goes from very cool to very hot, dewdrops actually collect on her knife, and she would just drink the dewdrops. I'm trying so hard to turn my boat around, it's just not working. Okay, there we go. So yeah, she collected the dewdrops from her blade, and that would be enough water for her to wander around the desert for the entire day. Not that believable, but hey. She also supplemented her water by drinking the blood of lizards that she would find in the desert. She would suck on different eggs, lizard eggs, for food. It was kind of gross, but she survived for 2 weeks just by doing that. And eventually, just when it seems like it was completely hopeless that she was going to die from not having proper rest, food, or water, this unicorn shows up, and this unicorn led her to this source of water, this mystical spring in the middle of the desert. She was saved, right? But then, eventually she would have had to leave. But this unicorn essentially saved her life. Let me see if I can find this hidden treasure. Yeah. And then she would have to leave the spring if she wanted to get out of the desert. So after leaving, obviously, there's, again, no more food, no more water. In fact, the unicorn got gravely injured by a monster. And Ciri, she really wanted to help it. And at that point, she would recall Yennefer teaching her how to wield magic. And she thought that maybe she can use magic to conjure up some rain so that we can all have something to drink. But she also remembered that you can channel magical energy from essentially anything in the world, but Yennefer would always tell her that if you try to channel energy from fire, unless you are an extremely skilled mage, you are going to get very, very hurt, because fire is this energy that you can't control just yet. You have to be very, very experienced. But there was nothing in the desert, right? There was no water to channel energy from. There was no plant life. There was no wind or anything. So she had to create a fire and channel energy from that. And from that, she actually brought about this massive rainstorm. She was successful, in other words, using the fire as energy. But then by doing so, she actually lost her ability to use magic altogether at that point. So she calls it like revoking the magical powers, but really it's just by using fire as a source of energy, you have just forever lost your ability to cast magic ever again, because it was something that you're not supposed to do. So yeah, that's why she lost her magical abilities. And throughout the course of her story, she would actually regain her magical abilities from just like various events. But the explanation of why Ciri, as like this person who has been taught how to use magic. In fact, when she was traveling with Yennefer, she attended the school of Aretusa for a while, which is kind of like a school for mages. Why can I not find this freaking hidden treasure? Yeah, so she was actually pretty adept at casting magic. Oh, it's right over there. I thought that was like some herbs underground or something. Yeah. So anyways, that was like the most pathetic treasure I've ever seen. 3 florins, really? God. So anyways, she's still in the desert. The unicorn is feeling a lot better. But she still had the predicament of just finding a way to survive. Eventually, these Nilfgaardian trappers actually came along, and they just captured Ciri. Now, of course, Cahir was not the only person looking for Ciri. You know, as a mission from the Emperor, he had like the entire Nilfgaard just combing the Northern Realms and combing all of these random places, just trying to look for Ciri. And you had the Nilfgaardian Emperor actually hire the help of an astromancer to try to figure out where Ciri is. And this guy, who was not completely incompetent, he divined that Ciri would be somewhere in this random desert out in the middle of nowhere. Everyone thought he was ridiculous, but these trappers, they would go there, and they actually did find Ciri, which was crazy. So yeah, she was basically captured by Nilfgaard at this point. But she was eventually freed by these elven bandits. So they called themselves the Rats, which is just like a bunch of elven kids, and they were just going around raiding people and taking their money, and well, mainly like rich people, right? Giving back to the poor. Your classic Robin Hood bandits. So yeah, she came upon these guys, and she was freed by these bandits from the Nilfgaardian trappers. They basically just like killed off all the Nilfgaardians, and she would run around with these elves for a very long time after that, because they just like made really good friends. In fact, at that point, Ciri didn't want any of these people, these elves, to know that she was the Princess of Sintra, because she knew that she was wanted throughout like the entire continent at this point. Everyone from Nilfgaard, which is basically the entire continent, wanted to find her. She could not risk giving up her true identity, so she just called herself Felka at this point. So yeah, all of her elven friends, they just knew her as Felka. They ran around for a very long time, got to be very good friends, until eventually Nilfgaard was just like, enough is enough. We need someone actually competent, not Cahir, not Swears. Swears was the leader of the trappers who found Ciri in the desert. So not these people. We need someone really competent. And this is where this one Nilfgaardian guy, he's like, I'm gonna hire a real bounty hunter. And this is where he employed this guy called Leo Bondhart to try to find Ciri, and find her he did. In fact, he found the rest of these elven rats. They call themselves the Rats. And he just slaughtered them, just one by one. And Ciri was just like kind of forced to watch, right? Because, I mean, the story is a little complicated. Like, she was not with her elven friends at that point, but then as soon as she arrived, she just saw all of her friends being slaughtered by this bounty hunter, and she was like super, super upset. She could have ran away at that point, but she didn't, because she wanted to avenge her friends. But Bonhart, who was like this super beefy, tall bounty hunter, he just destroyed Ciri and didn't kill her, but took her captive at that point, essentially. Because not only can she get a bounty from the Nilfgaardians for capturing her, he could also get a bounty from other people who wanted her for other various reasons, like crimes that she committed while she was running around with these elves, and she had like multiple bounties on her head. So yeah, Bonhart had a good reason to just keep Ciri around. In fact, he actually kind of grew attached to her because Ciri is obviously a very good swordswoman, and Bonhart also being very skilled with the sword, he was intrigued by her powers, so he actually bought her this sword. No, he didn't buy it. The blacksmith he visited actually gave her the sword for free, and she called her sword Zirel. I think I went over this in the last episode. But she was still essentially a captive of Bonhart's, and Bonhart forced her to do like a bunch of really just terrible things. Like she would be put into an arena and fight like all of these soldiers, just for the fun of the spectators, right? She would get like whipped and hit in public. Yeah, treated her really poorly. Until finally, Bonhart's like, well, I've had enough fun. Time to actually bring her to the Nilfgaardians. He brings her to this Nilfgaardian corner called Stefan Skellen, where one of Stefan Skellen's like mage assistants was in the area, and then this is where Ciri kind of like reawakened her magical abilities, and then she just slipped free of her shackles and just ran away. Obviously, the story is much more complex than that. Like she had visions and everything, and of magical powers, but the gist of it is she got this like explosion of magical energy, and she just got away from the Nilfgaardians and Bonhart. She just ran. Anyways, yeah, she just ran, and she knew exactly, well, she didn't know exactly where to go, but as she was running, she got really injured by Stefan Skellen's like this throwing star. They carry these throwing stars around, these Nilfgaardians called Orions, and this Skellen guy, apparently he was just really good at throwing them. Really injured, and then she just ended up in these swamps where she was just very randomly found by this one single hermit living around the swamps. There's not another person for like 200 miles, but she just happened to land in this one place where this is one hermit called Visigoda. So he healed her back to health, and at this point, Ciri, after a very long time, I think a couple of months, she stayed in these swamps with this hermit, and then she just says, I have to actually get going, thank you for healing me and whatnot, but I need to go back to my friends. But really, the only place Ciri knows to go is back to Thaned, where the council was held, because that's the last place she saw Yennefer. She wouldn't know exactly where to search. In hindsight, she probably could have gone back to Kaer Morhen or to Atlander, but I guess she just wasn't thinking about that, or she didn't know a really great path back to those places. But she did know that back at that island there was the Tower of Gulls, and legend has it that the Tower of Swallows links up to the Tower of Gulls with a teleporter. So the best way to get back there, well, find the Tower of Swallows, right? So they were doing a bunch of research. She eventually found out where this tower is, and while she is heading to the tower, it was supposed to be a very long journey. The Nilfgaardians, so Skellen, along with the bounty hunter Leo Bonhart, actually found her, but because the Tower of Swallows was like on this lake, and it was wintertime, so it was completely frozen over, and it was like really foggy in that on that day. Ciri showed off her ice skating skills, and she was just like skating around them, just picking off all of her pursuers one by one. So yeah, that's how she was able to escape from everyone, and she just jumped into the Tower of Swallows. And obviously, the tower didn't actually bring her back to the Tower of Gulls, back to Thaned, where Yennefer supposedly would be. It brought her to another dimension. Yeah, the dimension of the elves. The world of the NL. We've already been there. We've been to Tirnalia in The Witcher 3, where Gels was. So yeah, she was basically whisked away to that dimension. And that's where she meets Avalok, this elven sage. Oh, looks like we're all done with the places of interest down here. Which means, okay, let's head up here. And Avalok says something. He teaches Ciri about the White Frost and how it's impossible to avoid this disaster unless we had the power of the Elder Blood to teleport all of us away to a different location. Essentially what the Wild Hunt wanted to do, right? And at this point is where Ciri also meets Eridan. And Eridan, he is like the most ambitious of the NL elves. He really, really wanted Ciri's powers so that I don't know, at that point it's not completely obvious why he wanted the power. Maybe he was just power hungry. Maybe he truly wanted to save his people from the White Frost. But yeah, in the books it was explained that Ciri's own powers wasn't going to be enough to avert the disaster of the White Frost. We needed Ciri's offspring. That would be like the most powerful version of the Elder Blood, apparently. So these elves, they just say, well, we can't use you, but we can probably make a child with you, and then you can just do whatever you want after that. So they brought her to the king of the elves, Oberon. At first, Oberon had trouble just like trying to conceive a baby with Ciri. Like he couldn't sleep with her for some reason. So Eridan is like, dude, you gotta just man up and have a child with her. And Eridan gave Oberon just this like very powerful aphrodisiac. And it was so powerful that Oberon just died from it. He never even got to. I know it's really dumb. Like, I mean, in this game, in The Witcher 3, it's they say that he died because Eridan poisoned him, which is kind of true, because I do think that Eridan did slip some kind of poison in there, but I don't really know. In any case, Oberon died from this aphrodisiac concoction of Eridan's, and that was that. In the confusion, Ciri actually found the unicorn again in this dimension, the unicorn that saved her in the desert in the other dimension. So yeah, this unicorn was called Ihuaraquax, but Ciri just called it Little Horse, which was really cute. And together they opened up a portal using the power of the Elder Blood, and Ciri just escaped to another world. She just left Eridan behind, left Avalok behind, and she just got away. And at this point, Ciri was just teleporting using her Elder Blood powers all over the place, from one world to the next, from one timeline to the next. Eventually, like, in the books, they describe just various places that she's been, and I think, don't quote me on this, I think one of the places that she went to was in the real world, like our real world. I believe the word London or New York, one of the new real world cities, was used, and I found it fascinating. So yeah, she was just like wandering all around. In fact, we're talking about like the last book in the Witcher saga at this point, The Lady of the Lake. And in fact, a lot of The Lady of the Lake, this book, was in the perspective of a pair of sorceresses who were researching Ciri and Geralt's story in the future. So this was like probably 400 or somewhat years in the future, where, you know, the legend of Geralt of Rivia and Ciri, they are just legends at this point. No one knows if this actually happened, but they were just stories that people told to their kids. But these two sorceresses, they were just researching what happened with them, and a lot of the story was actually told in their perspective, so in the future perspective. But Ciri, through all of her time and world jumping, she actually ended up just at the place where these two were studying the legend, and they actually got to meet Ciri. It was actually really cool. This would be 300-400 years in the future, but her Elder Blood powers just like allowed her to jump between different times, different places. It was pretty wild. So, well, I mean, So eventually, after a very long time of jumping between worlds, she ended back up in the world she was supposed to be in the time that she was supposed to be in. But who knows, like, how long she actually spent, in these other dimensions. It could have really twisted her own timeline, and she would be either younger or older than everyone else at this point because, they were living in different times. That is kind of why Ciri appears to be relatively old in The Witcher 3, even though she's probably only like 18 years old. 20 years old she would be, yeah, because she was born in 1252. It's now 1272, so she would be 20 years old. She looks a little older than 20, to be honest. But that's not important. So she ended up in her own world again, and a random little bit of trivia is that she actually brought back a flea from a different timeline. And this flea had this like disease that was transmitted from the flea to a rat, to like a cat, to some humans, and this disease would eventually become the Catriona plague, because the first time the people got sick was on a boat called the Catriona, or I think it was called the Cassandra or the Catherine in the books, but in the games they decided to change it to Catriona. And that's where the plague came from. Very infamous in the Witcher world, because it killed off a whole bunch of people. So she came back to this world. At that time, the Battle of Brenna was happening with Nilfgaard. Geralt was like slightly involved, not really, but when she came back to this world, she actually offers herself up to Vilgefortz. Now, I don't remember the motive for this. I think she thought Vilgefortz could like help her find Geralt or something like that, but she just willingly walked into his hands, like. And she had shackles put on her. She didn't even try to give him any fight whatsoever. She's just like, here, Vilgefortz, take me. By the way, at this point, 3 different parties wanted Ciri to advance their own agendas. Vilgefortz wanted Ciri for her power. He was like, this sorcerer guy, he was already extremely powerful, but he wanted even more power. And he just wanted the Outer Blood because he likes power, and he thinks that if he becomes the most powerful person, he could save the world someday, and everyone will just like cherish and tell about his great deeds. Yeah, so that's why he wanted Ciri. It was like the most meaningless kind of search for power. The Emperor of Nilfgaard, Emir, wanted Ciri because he wanted the power of the Outer Blood to avert some kind of disaster. I think the White Frost, I guess, maybe. It's almost the same reason why the Wild Hunt wants Ciri. Wild Hunt being Eridan's crew. But we don't really see much of Eridan's people after she escaped the world of the NL. So, yeah. Emir wanted Ciri because of her Outer Blood powers, but he didn't want to wield this power. He just wanted to use it to save the world. And the third party of people who wanted her were the Lodge of Sorceresses, led by Philippa, because they think if they have this little Witcher girl who could use magic working for them, and then they marry her off to like some kind of prominent royalty, then eventually she could become a really powerful leader in this world, and the Lodge of Sorceresses working with her would also become very powerful. So that's the reason why they wanted her. But anyways, Ciri, in the hands of Vilgefortz, obviously, she was powerless to do anything about him because she was like all bound and everything. And just as Vilgefortz was about to cut her up for her powers, Geralt appears after spending like a bunch of time in Tucson for like no reason. He appears with his entire crew. Cahir was with him. I didn't tell the story of Cahir and Geralt, but he was with him. Dandelion was not with him, but the vampire Regis was with him, who we will see shortly in this game. And they fought Vilgefortz to rescue Ciri. Yennefer was with them. Yeah, that's right. Yennefer was with them. They fought Vilgefortz, they killed Vilgefortz, and rescued Ciri. But of course, after fighting this really tough fight against this one super powerful mage, Nilfgaard shows up, Emhyr shows up, and obviously Geralt, Yennefer, and Ciri were all captured by the Nilfgaardians once again. Well, not once again, but like, you know, out of the frying pan and all that, right? So, yeah. But, let me see. Yeah, Emhyr didn't really do anything with Ciri, though. He just basically let them go. For whatever reason. Yeah. He just let them go. That's when Yennefer actually took Ciri back to the Lodge of Sorceresses. And, as I said before, the Lodge Philippa also wanted Ciri to advance their own agendas. But once again, Philippa, the Lodge, just lets her go. Now, many other sorceresses were there, and they disagreed with letting her go, but eventually it came down to a vote, and guess what? We're just gonna let her go. So now, she's free once again, but at this point she was with Yennefer only. Geralt was far away in Rivia, doing his own things. But Ciri really wanted to meet him again, so she heads on to Rivia. And at that point, there was this riot, this civil war in Rivia. And this is what I was saying a little like earlier in this episode, like at the very beginning of this episode, where they were just like killing off all the non-humans in that town. And they thought Geralt was a non-human, so this peasant guy just like stuck a pitchfork in him. Ciri was there, helpless to do anything to help him. Triss and Yennefer were also there, and they were able to kind of divert attention away from Geralt for a while with their magic. But not before, you know, Geralt was actually stabbed, and Yennefer was also gravely wounded during the riot, during the uprising. Oh, look at that. We're all done. All done. Yes. So Ciri finally arrives, and he sees like Yennefer and Geralt's lifeless bodies, and she's just like really, really upset at that point. Zoltan and Dandelion were also there, so yeah, so she puts Geralt and Yennefer into this boat, and then she just sailed off, and everyone was just like saying their condolences. They were all grieving over Geralt and Yennefer's death during this Rivia massacre, really. Yeah, at that point, the story just ends. The Witcher saga is just done. She was sailing away, and then there was this mention of Geralt and Yennefer eventually waking up. But I think that it's happening in either in Ciri's imagination or in this alternate universe where Geralt and Yennefer were just taken to by her. I have no idea, but it really did seem like Geralt and Yennefer died that day, and they woke up, but it was in the afterlife or something like that. Yeah, there was nothing to actually suggest that the two of them were still alive, and the story just ends. In fact, the story ends with a scene where Ciri is like in this completely different world. There's like this really weird world with like King Arthur and Merlin and, and all these knights and dragons and stuff. And she was telling the story, this entire story, to this one knight guy. And she was making up things about how Yennefer and Geralt got married in the end, but we all know that was not true. Or maybe it was. Who knows? According to the Witcher books, though, Geralt and Yennefer gave up their lives for basically nothing. It was nothing like that valorous or brave or anything. Geralt was just like stabbed by a peasant, while Yennefer got wounded and eventually died because she wanted to save him. That's basically it. That is the end of the Witcher saga in the point of view of Ciri. Now, I can probably go on for much longer about how Geralt's story went, how Yennefer's story went. In fact, Yennefer was also imprisoned by Vilgefortz for a very, very long time. I could also go on about the political struggles between the Northern Realms and Nilfgaard, how the War of the Brenna came to be. But all that is not as interesting, I don't believe, as Ciri's story. And there were a bunch of other side characters as well. Who are all interesting in their own right, but that would just take too long to explain. And plus, it's been so many years, or 2 years, since I read these books. I may not remember all of the other smaller, more minor characters, but Ciri's story has always fascinated me, so that's why. That's that story. But anyways, we're done here. All the places of interest are also done in Skellige. Check it. Boom. All done. Oh no, they're not done. You know what? Let's just finish these up. I totally thought we were done. I'm so sorry. Let me just make sure there aren't any more. Okay, yeah, I'm pretty sure there are no more. There are 2 more over here, and then we're done. Oh, okay, in that case, I might as well go over a little bit about Geralt's story in the Witcher saga. That could be interesting. So, let's go all the way back to the Council of Mages back on Thanedd. So that's where Ciri jumped into the Tower of Swallows and she ended up in the desert. What was Geralt doing at that time? Well, Geralt got into a fight with Vilgefortz there on the during the council because, Vilgefortz basically just betrayed the entire Council of Mages. He killed off a bunch of them and he just escaped. But Geralt got into a really big fight with him. And you would think that Witcher Geralt would stand a chance against this mage, but nope. This mage just absolutely destroyed Geralt. He didn't even use any magic from what I remember. He just whacked him on the leg with a staff. That broke Geralt's leg, and that was that. Vilgefortz just ran away after that, and Geralt was just gravely wounded. In fact, he needed the help of Triss to actually get away from there. Triss teleported Geralt away off to Brokilon, the Forest of the Dryads. Now, Geralt has already been there before. He knows Eithne. He knows all the Dryads. So, they didn't treat him as a foreigner or anything. Dryads really hate humans. They don't like anyone besides their own kind. So, but with Geralt, they made an exception. He was supposed to be part of the Blade of Destiny and all that. So yeah, they took care of him for maybe a month or 2, possibly longer. That's where they kind of nursed Geralt back to health. And at this point, Geralt has no idea where Ciri is, but it was his duty to find her. So after he was all better, or he was mostly better, he set off. And this one woman who was really good friends also with the Dryads, she decided to go with Geralt because, who knows, she thought Geralt could use a guide. So this woman was called Milva, who has really no mention in this game, but she was a very major character in the Witcher saga. So Milva, very good with the bow, friend to the Dryads, serving as Geralt's guide. At this point, Geralt actually still believes that Ciri was taken by Nilfgaard because Emhyr, to save face, claims that they actually found Ciri because when in reality they have no idea where she is. But he basically just spread some propaganda, some false information about how Nilfgaard already has Ciri, and to cover up some of the story, they actually just grabbed a random village girl from one of those Nilfgaardian cities and dressed her up, put jewelry on her, put makeup on her, dyed her hair white or whatever, and just pretended that she was Ciri. They basically brainwashed her into thinking that she was Ciri and that Nilfgaard had her, when in reality Emhyr had no idea where he is. But so yeah, Geralt thought that Ciri was in the hands of Nilfgaard, so he was just traveling south. Along the way, he meets Cahir, who I did say earlier that he was in a coffin. He actually freed Cahir from the coffin, and they started journeying together looking for Ciri. At first, obviously, Geralt didn't trust him because Cahir's a Nilfgaardian, and the Nilfgaardians were trying to capture her. But eventually, they came to trust each other. They found this random vampire guy, just living in some homestead, and they became friends. Along the way, they also met Zoltan. Zoltan was just like traveling with his company of dwarves and this one gnome guy. They made friends, and they eventually met this little girl who they rescued from the clutches of Nilfgaard, called Angoulême. So you had like Geralt, Milva, Regis, who was a vampire, Dandelion, Zoltan, Angoulême. This was like the entire band of people traveling along with Geralt, trying to find Ciri. Was really cool. It's like the Fellowship, except they weren't trying to bring a ring to any place. They were just trying to look for Ciri. And things happened here and there. They eventually ended up in Vilgefortz's castle, because that's where they thought Yennefer was. Well, that's also where they thought Ciri was. Two birds, right? So they rescue them, and that's that. I've already told that story. Where the hell did my boat go? Seriously? It's like back there. Huh. I swear I left the boat over here. Oh my god. I need it for fast travel, that's why. Yeah, I could go on a little bit more into detail about what they did along the journey, but the most important thing is they eventually figured out that Ciri was not in Nilfgaard. He was being kept in Vilgefortz's castle, and that's where they went to rescue her. Actually, inside the castle itself, Milva gave up her life to an archer. It was like an archery duel. Angoulême gave up her life because she was trying to open a gate for Ciri to escape, and then she just got killed by like one of Vilgefortz's lackeys. It was kind of sad. And Cahir also gave up his life because Leo Bonhart, the bounty hunter, was also there in Vilgefortz's castle. And in order to buy Ciri some time, Cahir went into a sword duel with Bonhart, but he had no chance. Bonhart just cut him down. And actually, after that happened, Ciri just defeated Bonhart in the duel anyway. So, Ciri, clearly the best swordsman out of all of them. No question. Even better than this like Nilfgaardian knight Cahir. Anyways, that's it. That's really all I wanted to go over. The story of the Witcher books. I may have gotten things wrong here and there, but that's the gist of it. And if you wanted to like read a synopsis about the Witcher stories, you can also do that online, or you can just read the books. I think they're a decent read. Now, granted, the author does go into some really crazy amount of detail in these books. Sometimes, I think, an unnecessary amount of detail, which, throughout 5 books, how many pages is that? Maybe like almost 2,000 pages of books. Not that many things happened, right? But because of how much detail he went into with all of his little stories, it just kind of dragged on. So if you want to read them, it's fine. But I think if you just want to learn the story about what happened, then reading a synopsis is the way to go. Or if you understood anything that came out of my mouth, that would have been okay too. Anyways, guys. Look at this. This is actually kind of cool. Whoa. It's like a little gulf with a bunch of sirens in it. I'm just going to grab onto this boat, fast travel back to town, and then off screen I'm going to like do a little bit of selling off of some of the stuff that we looted this time. In preparation for our blood and wine journeys. And after that, we'll be off to good old Tucson. It's gonna be good. I don't think I can fast travel with these sirens clawing away at me. Oh, I gotta go this way. Hopefully they don't destroy my boat before I get away. That is a real issue. But at least now that we're all done with the places of interest here in Skellige, we won't have to deal with sirens anymore. Well, at least not, like, on the open waters, Tucson has its own challenges in terms of monsters, but nothing as bad as this. Yeah. Alright, so world map. Let's go back to Kertrode. Yeah, that would do. Okay, anyways, guys. I don't know how many of you would have sat through that entire story. I can't see that being very fun. But I needed something to talk about, and I thought it would have been an interesting subject to broach. So, oh my god, I can't stop my boat. Come on, Geralt. Yeah, there you go. I'm not even going to sail back in there to the harbor. I'm just going to walk back there. Come on, there we go. Yep, so the next episode we come back. We're heading off to the good old land of wine and fables once again. Thanks for watching this time, guys. Yeah, this was the last series in the Sailing the Seas. What am I still doing? See you in the next one.